This is Gemara Sanhedrin and Daf Chaf, and all the learning should be an incredible schos aliyas neshama for Rav Aryeh ben Rav Ya'akov, whose yahrzeit is this month, and all the learning is sponsored as an Eloi Nishmasoi. Psiyata Dishmaya should bring him higher and higher in Gan Eden Shalmaila, closer to the Kisei HaKavod and be a Militz Yesher for his entire family and ultimately the entire Chabura. So we're holding on to your Testament Bees in the middle of incredible Agadatas about Kol Megadel, Yasam, Kol Melami Taira, Leben Chaveiroi. It's considered as if you birthed them. So says the Gemara, we are 4 lines into the wide lines. Lachein Kayamar Hashem, so says Hashem El Beis Yaakov Asher Pada, as Avraham. It's the house of Yaakov who freed Avraham. Asked the Gemara, really? Where do we find? 1 second, I'm sorry, we just lost a place. Where do we find Yaakov Shepad Avram? Where do we find that Yaakov freed Avram? So Rav Yehuda Shepad Mitzar Gidol Banim. What this means is Yaakov freed him from the difficulties of raising children. As the pasuk says. Hainu dersev loy ata yibo ish Yaakov. Now Yaakov will not be embarrassed and his face will not be pale. Explains the Gemara, lo ata yivosh me aviv, won't be embarrassed of his father. V'lata panav yichvaru, and his face will not be pale. Me avei aviv, from his grandfather Avram, and this is because Yaakov raised the Shvatim, which in reality Avram would have had to, but Yaakov took on the task. Therefore, says the Gemara, at some level, it's considered that Yaakov Avinu freed Avraham. Continues the Gemara, back to the discussion of David HaMelech marrying the daughters of Shaul. We started talking about he married Meirav, he married Michal. Says the Gemara, Ksiv Palti. Pasuk says Palti, Ksiv Paltiel. So which one was it? So Amar Rav Yochanan, 5 lines from the bottom. Palti Shemai v'lam nikashma Paltiel. His name was Palti. So how to say Paltiel? Shapaltu min Aveira. You know why? Because he was saved from Aveira Masa. What did he do? No, he put a sword between his bed and Michal's bed. Amar, he said, anyone who kills with his Aveira will be impaled with this sword. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. V'aksev, the pasuk says, V'ilech ita isha. Her husband Palti went with her. This is a pasuk about the Michal. Answers the Gemara, Shenase lo ki isha. He became like a husband to her. He supported her. He loved her, but he obviously did nothing with her. V'aksev halachu bacha al mitzvahs al ha-mitzvah. But the pasuk says that he went, that Palti went in crying. What is he crying if he actually wasn't together at all with Michal? So what was the problem over here? Explains the Gemara, fascinating. You know what Palti was crying for? Al ha-mitzvah dazumine. He lost the mitzvah. He lost the mitzvah of not being with Palti. Continues the Gemara, Ad Bachurim, the Palti went with Michal until a place called Bachurim, Shenase, Shneim Ki Bachurim. What this means is they both were like youths, Bachurim, Sotamu Tambia. They were never together. Continues the Gemara, equating this incredible act of Palti with the act of Yosef HaTzadik. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan, teaches Rav Yochanan, Takfu shal Yosef amnosinu shal Boaz. The Yosef's success is nothing compared to that of Boaz. Takfu shal Boaz is nothing. Amnosinu shal Palti ben Loish. Takfu shal Yosef amnosinu shal Boaz achsev v'ivachatzi alayla v'yechadesh v'yivlaf v'yilfas. It was in the middle of the night, and he went and he turned about v'yilaf face. And all of a sudden Boaz sees that who's at his feet? Rus. My ve'ilafes Amar Rav Shenasa b'sarai kiroshe lefasa. He said his flesh came as hard as the head of a turnip. That even though Boaz wanted to be with Rus, he overcame the incredible temptation. Continues the Gemara as we turn over to Chafam and Aleph. Takfu shal Boaz is Anvisanusa shal Palti ben Loish is nothing, is Anava, is Maris, compared to that of Palti ben Loish, Kid Amar, and as we just said. Amar Rav Yochanan, teaches Rav Yochanan the second line of Daf Chav Amir Aleph. Amar Rav Yochanan, my dersev. What is the meaning of the pasuk? Rabbi is a banus also chayil. The pasuk in Isha is chayil vatalis al klon, and you are greater than all of them. Rabbois banos l'zachel ze Yosef. This is Yosef. His incredible success, not succumbing to the temptation with Asians by Tifar. Yosef Ubayas. Vatalis al kulana zu zepalti ben loish. Amar Shmuel Nachmini Amar Rav Yeinasan. My dear, what is the meaning of the pasuk? Sheker achein. If he continue quoting from Isha's Chal, Greece is false and beauty is vain. Sheker achein ze Yosef Evel av Yofi ze bois Yeras Hashem itisal esum ze balti ben loish. Tavarach another b'shar Sheker achein ze Torah shel Moshe Evel Yofi ze Torah shel Yeshua. Yeras Hashem itisal ze Torah shel Chizkiyahu. Tavarach Sheker achein ze Torah shel Moshe v'Yeshua Evel Yofi ze Torah shel Chizkiyahu. Yeras Hashem itisal ze Torah shel Rav Yehuda b'Rav Eloi. Now, what was about this dar? Rav Yehuda Rav Eloi. Amar Lav al Rav Yehuda Rav Eloi. Sheyeshisha talmidim iskasim b'talis echad v'oiskim b'atayr. The incredible dar of Rav Yehuda ben Eloi, that even though they were incredibly impoverished, they had nothing, yet 6 people were able to be covered with one coat, so that they were able to sit and learn Torah. And we continue with the Mishnah. Meis lo meis, going back to din of the Melech. If a relative of the Melech dies, and he eats me Pesach, Plalton Shalai doesn't leave his palace, Shita Rishayna. Rav Yehuda argues, Rav Yehuda, Merim Roitalot says, Achar Amita, Yaitz, if he wants to leave, he can leave. Shkein Matzinu B'David, Shiat Achar Mitasai Shal Avner. David Lamaisa went after the meat of Avner. Shneimar V'Melech David Eilich, Achar Amita. Amar Lei. Amrulei, the Chacham say to Rav Yehuda, Loya Davar. So what happened? The reason is David wanted to show the people that he wasn't responsible for the Misa of Avner, but it's not, you can't bring a right from here that the Melech is allowed to leave his palace. And when they feed him, we know that the first meal that the mourner eats comes from other people. So when this meal is given to the king, everyone sits on the floor, and the king sits on the dargesh, which we'll see in a few moments what exactly that is. And we dive right into the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, Makom shenagu nashim loti zachar amita yoitzeis livnei amita yoitzeis, in a place in which the custom is for the woman to go before the mita, before the procession. They do. If the custom is to go after, they go after. Rav Yehuda Imer Lo'ilam Nashal Livnei Amita Yaitzeis. Why? Shkein Metzinu B'David. We find with David HaMelech Shatzer Achar Mitasei Shel Avner. We see that David went after the mita of Avner. So must be, where were the women if David was after the mita? Must be, proves the Gemara, the women were in front of the mita. Shneimar Melech David Eilich Achar Amita. Amru Lai, the Chum respond to Rav Yehuda. Leia Davar, no, don't bring a raya from David HaMelech Alafayis Esam. Don't bring a raya from David, because he only went to Lafayis to appease the people of Nispaisu, and they were appeased. Shaya David Yaitzi mi bein Hanashim, v'nichlas lebein Hanashim, yes, bein Hanashim, v'nichlas lebein Hanashim. David would go for the man and go to the woman, and go to the woman and go to the man. She'enemar, as the Pasuk says in the first medium-sized line, v'yadu kol amcha Yisrael ki lo yisa hamelech la'amis as Avner. And all the people knew that Avner's murder was not because of the king, not because of David HaMelech. So we can't bring a raya from what happened at that funeral. Darish Rava. Rava comes along, and Darshid's continuing, proving that David HaMelech indeed succeeded in appeasing the people. We're on the second medium-sized line. What is the meaning of the pasuk? And all the people came. Lahavreis says David to give the suda to David. In the beginning, they came to Lachreis, to cut off, to kill David. They felt that David was responsible for the misa of Avner. Why lemaisa was Avner punished? He should have protested when Shaul killed Noiv Ir HaKoyanim, but he did not protest. If Yisagamar Micha, he protested, but they didn't listen to him. Both of Darshan the same pasuk about Avner. Says the pasuk and the king was Mekainen. He lamented over Avner. Should Avner have died as though he was worthless? Lin Chushtayim Ugashu. His hands were not tied and your feet were not put in chains. The Gemara explains now how each Shita darshes this pasuk. Man, Damar according to Rav Loi Micha, he didn't process us at all. Achi Kamer Yedechelo Surah Zegechelo Nenechshasim Ugashu My Time Aloi Michas. And the reason is because Lamaisa, you did not protest. My time Aloi. One more time. My time So why did you not protest? Can fall if nay. Can fall lefanai. Lefnei b'nei avla nafalta. Since you didn't protest, you were killed like a worthless wicked man. The other Shita, according to Rav Yitzchak, he protested, they didn't listen to him. David HaMelech is wondering, Hakemois novel Yamos Yadechalo Yisur Zagechalo Nefsai Mechti Mechiyah Machis. David HaMelech is bemoaning the fact. What do you want from Avner? He did what he could. He protested. My time can fall of Nei Banei Avla Nefalta. Why did he deserve such a death? Says the Gemara, okay. According to the second shot, according to Rav Yitzchak, if he lemaisa was meicha, why was he punished? Amar Rav Nachman Rav Yitzchak, Shesha Malchus Beisav Shtei Nashim Umechsa. You know why Abner was punished? Because he delayed David HaMelech becoming king for 2.5 years. And we continue quoting the Mishnah, Kshemaver Nesayin, of course, as we should mention, as always, in all these Egadata Gemaras, there's always that much more to discuss, that much more depth. But let's at least get Hashim Shad. We quote the Mishnah that when they give the Sudas Avra to the king, they all sit on the floor. The king sits on the Dargish. My Dargish asks the Gemara. The first word of line is the Dargish, is smack in the middle of the medium-sized lines. And Chava Meralev Amar Ula Arsa Degada. It's a bed of good luck that they set up a table and they made a bed in one house that was unused, and these were simanim of good luck. Says the Ula, I don't know. Says the Rabbanan to Ula, are you going to tell me until now, before the king was in Avelos, he didn't sit on this thing, and now he sits upon it? How is this covered? What, we're giving him something that he never used? So Maskiv la Rava. So rather, Rava comes along and he asks on the kasha, meaning he defends Ula. My kasha, damamidi davi achilo ushtiya. Maybe this is something about eating and drinking. Dan in Allah. Until now, before the king was in Avel, the people didn't feed him food and drink from their own. The king ate of his own stuff. But Hashta, now that he's in Avelus, now that there's this din of a Suda Savra, that you have to give him a Suda, we're feeding him, giving him to drink. And that's the reason why he's going to come to this new table, Matziv, because right now it's a new Matziv. Says the Gemara, Li Kasha, Kasha. Says the Gemara, but rather, if you have a kasha, the following is the question. It says Rava. But what's the kasha? Dargish a dargish is not required. The oval is not required to turn over a dargish. Ela zaykfai, stand it up on its end. So what exactly? We know that one of the things that the mourner has to do, he sits on the floor, which literally is referred to as turning the bed upside down. The question is, but this dargish type of bed is something that can't be done such with it. And if you're going to tell me that this thing that he said in is this special type of mita, so why doesn't he have to flip it over? But we learned in Abra, an Aval who turns over his bed, call mitais. The Aval has to turn over all the beds in his house. So what's going on over here? So says Rava, that's the kasha you should have asked on Ula. Says the Gemara, my kasha. Maybe the bed was designated not for him to sit on, it was designated for a kalim. That if it's a bed miyuchad for kalim, then it does not have to be turned over. Ali kasha kasha. Rather, says the Gemara, you know what the kasha is. Rav Shimon Gamliel Leimer says Rav Shimon Gamliel Dargish Matir Karbitin. You know what a dargish is? It's binding and it falls. You untie it and it falls on its own. Are there karbitim? So again, let's just be clear. We don't know what this dargish is. We're trying to define it. Within our definition, we're trying to see how it makes any sense based on other dinim that we have in Avel. They said to me, that he was off in the market for leather, the leather's marketplace. V'amar le my dargish arsa disali. It's a bed of leather, and that's what the king would sit upon when they gave him this suda. Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Amar Rav Yechanan, says Rav Yirmiyah, the name of Rav Yechanan, as we turn over to Chafam and Beis. What is a dargish? Seirugai mitaychai. The weaving goes through it. The leather is attached to the flame. Through the leather piece is attached to the frame, mita seyruga me'al gabo. But in a bed, the weaving's on top of it, the different ways that the bed is constructed, and that is another specific detail about this item, about this unique dargish bed that the king is sitting upon for his Sudas Ivra. Meisvei asked the Gemara on the way that this bed is made. Kliates meimazai mekabel toma. When is a wooden keli mekabel toma? Hamita v'arisa meisheishufam ba'or hadog. Says the Gemara, a bed in the crib is mekabel toma once you rub them with fish skin to make them smooth. V'imita misuragas. He me'al gaba. But if you're going to tell me that this bed, the ropes go on top of it, lamali shifa. Why are you smoothing it down in aradog? If the way you're going to wrap it with the ropes is going to go over the frame, asks the Gemara. So why are you bothering? Anyways, it's going to have the ropes on top of it. Rather, says Gemara, no. This leather bed, really, the wrapping is inside of it as well. Rather, the all mitaychai. Mi ta'ule v'afuke bezuni targesh ta'ule v'afuke b'avkasa. Says the Gemara, the bed, it's threaded in and out in the sides of the sideboards, whereas the dargesh, it goes in and out of loops on the sideboards. Different ways the bed is made. Amr Rav Ya'akov, Amr Rav Shimon Levi, Elchasa, Alachik Rashbag. The halach is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel with regarding that you have to untie the bindings on this dargish. When we had a machlekes, what you do with the dargish, you have to stand it up, or you have to untie it. It says the Gemara, we go with Rashbag. Amar Rav Yaakov Barami mita shenak litel yotzin zaykva v'daya. A bed whose vertical poles come out of the bed, they're attached to the bed. You could stand it up, and that is enough, and you won't have to untie this whole matziv. And we continue with a new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, more halacha is about a king. I'll be bezdin. A king could go to a voluntary war through bezdin of Shem V'echad. Upayreitz la'asois leiderech, and he can make his own road. Ve'imemacha biyada, and the bezdin cannot protest. Derech hamelech ein lo shiur. The way of a king, there's no shiur. You can have as much as you want. Cholam b'izdiv v'naistin lai. Says the Gemara, during the war, all the people put the spoils in front of him, and he takes whatever he wants. More halacha is about the king, how he goes to war, and what he's allowed to do in war. Says the Gemara, we already learned one time. Hopefully, we remember this Gemara. This is the very beginning of the Masechta. That what do we learn? We learned that the king only goes to war through a bezdin of 71. Says the Gemara. This was the Rishus of Melchama on the Mishnah Daf Beis, which was explained that you need 71 to allow the king to go to war. This is really explained the Daf Tez Zayin, if you remember. Daf Tez Zayin, we had that the Shevet was being tried in front of a Bezdin Shel Shimon V'echad, and we said that the soldiers are coming to take Rishos from Melchem's Rishos, and from there we quoted David HaMelech about taking Rishos back to Gemara and Brachas Daf Beis. Says the Gemara, I did the Tani called Mili de Melech. Says where you're right, we don't really need to say this. Because we said all the other halachas of the king, so we say this halacha as well. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Kol Omer b'Parshas Melech. We continue, once we're discussing the Melchamas of a king, we go into Shmuel And let's let the Gemara explain itself. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Kol Aimer b'Parshas Melech. Every thing it says about in the Parshas Melech mutter boy. The king is mutter. Rav Amar Lo Nemer Parshas Zu Ela Li'iyim Aleihem. Says the Gemara, no. Now this Parshas Melech, this is in Shmuel Aleph Paraches. It lists many different items. So says the Gemara, everything that's listed the king can do. But Rav says no. Lo Nemer Parshas Zu Aliyim Aleihem. To place the fear of the king and the people. Shenemer Saintis V'Lecha Melech. The people have to be fearful of the king, but not necessarily do we actually learn from here that these are the things that you're allowed to do. The Gemara points out, Kitanoi, that in reality this detail is a machlekes Tanoim, 3 lines into the wide lines of Yesi Omer. Kol Omer Parshas Melech muter boy. And Rav Yehuda Omer Lo Nemer Parshas K'nei L'ayim Aleihem. Shenemar Saitizim Alecha Melech Shetei Masa Alecha. As we just said, the same machlekes whether the king is really mutter and everything that it says to utilize that power, or it just means that everyone should be fearful of the king. Continues the Gemara, V'chein haya Rav Yehuda Omer. Similarly, Rav Yehuda would say, Gimel mitzvahs. There are 3 mitzvahs, the Savi Sabak Yisrael La'aretz. 3 mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael are commanded when they enter into Eretz Yisrael. Number 1, Melech. Number 2, Lachar Zar Shalom Malik. Number 3, Liv Noislam Bayis Beis Abachira. Appoint a king, destroy Amalek, and build the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Neraya Omer Lo Nemer Parshas Zu El Keneged Taruma Son. The parsha that says the Saimtes Melech HaMelech teaches Rabbi Neraya was said in response to the complaints of the nation that they should be allowed to do similar to the neighbors, to the other nation. Shenemar V'Amarta Asima Alech HaMelech V'Gomer. As you see from the pasuk, and you will say that you should place upon them a king. So Rabbi Neraya is arguing Rabbi Yehuda and says that it's really not a mitzvah to create a king, but rather it's the fact that Hashem is just responding to Klal Yisrael. Knowing that the Klal Yisrael will complain not to having a king, Hashem says you should make a king. Tanya, we learned in Abraham. Rabbi Eliezer Omer teaches Rabbi Eliezer, the elders of the generation by Shmuel asked appropriately when they asked for a king. Meaning, we just said a moment ago that this request for a king was inappropriate. Says the Gemara, no, that's a machlekes of Eliezer says. The Zekanim asked appropriately, but the Maratzim kilkalu shem Ravinu gamanachnu k'layim shavteinu k'malkeinu v'yatzel avneinu. The Maratzim asked in a mannerism that it's just to be like the other nations. Tanya learns in a brayz. Rabbi Yosi Omer shalosh mitzvahs ali sokin das la'aretz lam lamelech. Teaches Rabbi Yosi there are 3 mitzvahs that Klal Yisrael was commanded when he got into Eretz Yisrael to appoint a king. Lachar zar shamal v'nu zebez zechira v'eni yodei ezem em techila. And says Rav Yosi, I do not know which of them comes first. When the pasuk continues, it says, from here we see first comes to point a king, because the pasuk kisei means king. Shenemar yoshev shleimai al kisei Hashem lamelech. So we know comes number 1 to what? To point a king. But we still don't know what comes first, to build a Beis HaMikdash or to cut off Amalek. Shoimer v'niach lechem mikol ha'veichem v'goymer v'yamakim shevicha Hashem v'goymer v'yomer lachazar shel Amalek tchila comes first. V'chein b'David who oimer we find b'David HaMelech it says Yiki Hashem HaMelech David b'Esav Hashem yiniach la misaviv v'ksev. So David HaMelech is in his house. Yimar HaMelech al nasan hanavi reina anoichi yoshe Beis HaRazim v'goymer. So what do we see from this pasuk? We see from this pasuk similarly to what we just said, that which one comes first? Is it first to build a Beis HaMikdash, or is it first to destroy Amalek? We see in the Psukim that first you have to destroy Amalek and then build a Beis HaMikdash. And we're finding the same thing about David HaMelech, that only after he's only after he's sitting there and he tells Nasan and Avi that they have to destroy their enemies, only afterwards they go only after does he go and ask to build a Beis HaMikdash. So what comes first? First comes destroying Amalek. Amar Reish Lakish teaches Reish Lakish. Be'etzchila melech Shlomo al Yohanim. Teaches Reish Lakish. Once we're on the topic of kings, let's go into Shlomo HaMelech. Originally, Shlomo HaMelech ruled over the Elyonim, the upper beings, the Shedim, the demons. Shenever Yashav Shlomo al Kisei Hashem. Melech al Tachtainim. And then eventually Shlomo HaMelech rules over those on this world. Shenemer Ki Ureida B'chol Avar. Anar mis Pasach va'ad Azah from the Tifsach, va'ad Abza. Rabbi Shmuel says, Rabbi Shmuel, this pasuk is debated. Chadam or Tifsach b'seiva Eilam va'azah b'seiva Eilam. That's one shav. Chadam or Tifsach va'azah ba'adi adadi. They're next to each other. Haviyasi, they're both next to each other. Kshem shemalach al Tifsach va'azah. Just like he rolled over these two places that were next door to each other, he rolled over the whole world of the Seif. But at the end, he only rolled over Kal Yisrael. Shenemar, the pasuk says, and he calls Yisrael Melech Yisrael v'Goyim l'B'Seif l'Melech El Yushalayim. So you see, Shlomo Melech went from ruling the demons to the world to Klal Yisrael to only Yerushalayim. Shenemar, David calls when David Melech v'Yushalayim l'Seif l'Melech El Mitasai, and eventually Shlomo Melech only rules over his own badge. He only rolled over his walking stick. Rav Ushmal Goindoi. Says Rav Shmuel, we have a machlekes. What does the pasuk means when it says Chalki Mikol Amali? This. One Mandamar says it means his stick. The other one says Gundai, it means his cloak. Hadar, oy, loy, hadar. Says the Gemara, the Shlomo Melech go back, rolling over everything, the upper world. Rabbi Shmuel Chadam Hadar, Chadam loy, hadar. Mandam loy, hadar, Melech v'adiyat, Mandam hadar, Melech v'adiyat, Melech. A machlek is whether Shlomo Melech started as a Melech, went down to being a commoner, and went back up to being a Melech, or he was a Melech and he ended as a Hadiyat. That's the machlek is Rabbi Shmuel. We'll stop over here. We'll continue by Paritz Lasais Loiderach the next year. B'siyata Dishmaya.